Okay, we'll start in 1 minute. So if anybody wants to get water or coffee, it's your last chance. No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming here today. We've got a really rich agenda ahead of us. We have people from all over the world, from Australia and from all over Europe as well, to talk about different aspects of engaging citizens with well-being statistics and data with technology. It's quite a wide-ranging agenda. As you can see, we have the morning session on communication, and then the afternoon we're looking at different types of new data sources, including crowdsourcing and open data. We had, this is the second of two workshops we're holding on this issue. The first one was in September, and it was quite a small event with examples from civil society. And everybody involved found it a very valuable experience to come and to hear from people who are working on fundamentally the same issue, but from a different angle. So we hope that we're going to have the same richness and diversity and value from the discussions today. We're going to open with just a few short words from, first of all, Lorena Anania, who's the scientific officer at DG Connect, who's in charge of the collective awareness platforms for sustainability and social innovation project, which is the umbrella project, which is bringing together our project WebCozy, which Donatella Fazio from ESTAT will present briefly. And then Marco will just share a few words on the OECD and why we feel it's important for official statistics and government to be interested in these issues. So I'll pass over to Lorena briefly.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us, and especially the ones who've traveled all the way from Australia. So that's great to be here. This is a coordination action funded by the EU Research and Development Programme, and it's a rather innovative group of projects. It's a new initiative, just started, not even 1 year in work. And the idea of collective awareness platforms was to use some of the innovative networking technologies. I think of Airbnb, Uber, these are the ones, but there are many. And what's happened is that now, thanks a lot to Internet of Things, citizens are more connected through applications in everyday life. And you see it when you go to Paris and you don't ask people, you have your own navigator, your own. So we thought it would be important to use these technologies to do something about sustainability and social innovation. Why sustainability and social innovation? These are things that have been looked at top-down, but all of these state objectives, say targets. So the target is 27% renewable energies, 40% reduction in greenhouse emissions, 20% reduction in unemployment. These are high-level targets, but top-down is not the way to make any impact. They tend to, it tends to not be fulfilled. So what you need is citizen engagement. With citizen engagement in things like education, in even weight reduction, then you get peer pressure and you share your data, your heartbeats. Now everything's on the internet. How many steps you've taken today. But these intermediate groups, not at the level of states, nor at the level of individuals, but at the level of groups helped by applications that utilize statistics and personalize them to the level of an individual, will act as incentives to change behavior. So to recycle your garbage, this is a learning process. And it needs to be reinforced at the community level. So we are putting together 10 projects. Many of them are doing applications. There's Cap for Access, which we discussed last time, which is about handicapped, well, like me, handicapped people who don't like to carry suitcases up and down metro stations, So it's about navigation for people with disabilities, which in aging society is a lot of them. There's one called Decent about cryptocurrencies or crowdfunding. There's one about crowdfunding and crowdsourcing together. So these are, my unit, by the way, is called Net Innovation. So we have to look at those things that help social innovation by the use of advanced technologies. Although technology is not the object of these projects. The objects of these 10 projects is to engage grassroots communities of citizens to use them and scale up at European, or today I see more global level, in order to make an impact on those things that we care about, which I've given some examples. So, yes, there's another good news, which is that the second phase of these projects is open. It was announced, it's part of the Horizon 2020 framework program, and there will be budget for more such projects. So I welcome you to go to Collective Awareness. It's under the digital agenda. If you put those 2 words in, you see a website. There will be a lot of information events on this, so that as to get a lot of good proposals by, hasn't been announced yet, should be around April, should be called deadline. And we plan to evaluate July or August. So there will be a follow-up. And the first info day was in Florence, and there were thousands of people there. So that's the good news, is that we got some of the budget. It was reduced since what we asked for, but okay, these days that doesn't make any news, budget reductions. So we have to do more with less. But thank you very much for holding this coordination meeting. I'm pleased to see so many organizations, government representatives here to help them. Thanks.
Good morning to all of you. I'm Donatella Fazio from ISTAT, the Italian National Institute of Statistics, which is the coordinator of McCaughey project. Now I'm trying to give you a brief overview of the project in order to contextualize this workshop. As Lorena said, McCaughey is embedded in a CAP's Vision project based on the idea that collaborate through crowdsourced platform can produce solutions for a wide range of social needs. In this context, the general objective of McCaughey is to foster the engagement of society at large in statistics beyond GDP, exploring and exploiting the Web 2.0 opportunities. McCaughey capitalizes on the last 10 years characterized by 2 big revolutions for the world of research and beyond, the GDP and beyond debate, and the internet explosion that has radically changed the way in which information is produced and shared, changing the roles of producers and users of data, moving to a bottom-up approach for the construction of statistics. Such words as big data, open data, crowdsourced data are the main words for statisticians and data producers and data users of these years. The specific objective of McCaughey is empowering the use of crowdsourced data for collecting and producing information with increasing trust in collectively generated statistics. The final aim is to contribute for better integration of and complementarity of official and unofficial statistics. McCaughey is based on a consortium because this is a project funded by the FP7 program. So a consortium is the subject, the actor of the implementation of the project. ISTAT, the Italian National Institute of Statistics, the historical producers of official data, OECD, and 2 civil society organizations, Lunaria, which is from Italy, and iGenius, a social entrepreneurs community from UK. McCaughey works networking with European and abroad initiatives, in particular with CAPS project and other Eurostat ongoing initiatives. It is supported by an advisory board chaired by Mr. Enrico Giovannini. McCaughey work plan wants to reach some main objective: mapping and distilling the best practice for communities involvement Specifically, I can say that ISTAT, now we are conducting within WebCausi activities, ISTAT has launched a survey addressed to NSAI on Web 2.0 initiatives carried out and or planned to empower statistics using new sources of data. The second point is empowering the engagement of communities, creating critical mass through various online initiatives, the setup of European Wikiprogress University program, and the organization of several face-to-face open events, one of these, of course. The development of a wiki of progress statistics on the Wikiprogress platform hosted by OECD, and the delivery of several stock-taking reporting documents and policy briefs. WebCausi activities are carried out so far are the release in August of the first beta version of Wikiprogress data portal to test with users in the next months, 2 online discussions organized by OECD, engage citizen well-being progress statistics in April, making data more accessible for society at large in June, and 1 webinar organized by Lunaria, civil society engagement and well-being statistics, good practice from Italy in June, and as Kate already said, the first workshop on using technology in the perspective from civil society in September. The discussion so far has involved a large number of stakeholders and citizens. Just to give some figures, the 2 discussions online and the webinar have been followed by 84 different participants, nearly 2,000 unique visitors, and through Twitter, we have reached about 180,000 accounts. So the effect is good. Many people involved. The first workshop counted 25 participants. It was very impressive, the discussion. I hope today it will be the same. I invite you to visit the website of the project where you can follow us and interact with the project. You can visualize the activities carried out and download available material. And so you can see what the online discussion, how the online discussion were carried on. Today's workshop on using technology in the perspective from official statistics and government represents an important step for WebCausi to learn about experiences, the best practices, and the difficulties from NSAIs and governments to interact with citizens and exploit crowdsourced data for the empowering of statistics and their understanding and usage. Many open issues arise in this perspective. The trade-off between having more real-time information and the quality of the information produced. The how to integrate and complement non-official data with official data. The different weight of the usage of crowdsourced data at local, national, international, and global level. How to organize the statistical information beyond GDP generated by non-official data together with official data in an integrated framework to represent an understandable real tool for policymakers to drive policies close to the real citizen needs in terms of well-being. It's all. Thank you for your attention. Let's start our discussion now.
I just take 2 minutes before you start the real discussion. I wanted just to welcome you on behalf of the OECD for this second workshop that we're organizing in the context of the WebCausi project. I'm Marco Miradercolo. I'm the head of the division on household statistics and progress measurements, which is the division where Kate, Salima, and all the Wikiprogress team are working. As you all know, measuring well-being is an important part of our work in statistics at the OECD, but I think we can say it is important for the OECD as a whole. The colleagues from the public communication are here with us today, but many more directors are engaged in a range of projects which built on this approach. And this is testified by the motto that you see of the OECD everywhere in this building about better policies for better lives. Is also an important part of the work of many NSOs. Many of you are here, but there are many more initiatives going on around the world, and this by itself is a huge achievement and something that simply did not exist only a few years ago. Now, the type of one question that we are always confronted with when we talk about our work on measurement is better metrics for doing what? And to some extent, it is true that the challenge for us is that of bringing this measure to the public discourse, to reorient policies, to provide information that is useful for the decision of citizens and policymakers. And in that perspective, the relation with citizens is very important. It's important for building the legitimacy of the measure that we are being proposed. It's important for the content of the measure, because citizens themselves are the basic unit, statistical unit from which information on people well-being is gathered. Now, when we talk about technologies, of course, it opens up a whole new range of possibilities for engaging citizens. At first level, it is a possibility in terms of dissemination. And this is something that is made possible by tools for visualization and interactive tools like the one that we have used in the house, the Better Life Index, which is something important also for us in generating information that we can use as an organization, people's preferences and perceptions. It is important for collecting information, and some NSO have been experimenting with web-based service, and more generally, mobile devices are important for providing information on where people are, with who they are connected, and in perspective, you could think that could be used for providing information on the use of their time or their health conditions. And then it's important for the creation of information. And there is these days a lot of discussion on big data, and also in the context of the discussion on the Sustainable Development Goals. There is little doubt that the increase in computing power, the digitalization of information, the censoring that many mobile devices are providing are resulting in a huge increase in the amount of data that are available. It is something that confronts statisticians with difficult issues. The typical way in which statisticians think about their work is they start from a problem and then they think what is the data that can best be used to answer the problem. Here we are starting with data, and we have to look for problems that those data will allow addressing. We are at the beginning of a process. There have been many interesting experiments in these fields. We will be learning from your own experience in these fields, but some of the experiences include the use of online prices to predict inflation, the use of satellite mapping of artificial light to monitor economic activity, and we are using in the OECD exploring the OECD the possibility of using Google searches to find more about predicting changes in subjective well-being or in unemployment or in other fields. So there will be some interesting initiatives are already on the floor, but we hope very much that the experiences and that you will bring to the table in this meeting will be something that will allow us to move forward in our understanding in this field. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm just going to finish the welcoming remarks by saying this matters. Engaging citizens with well-being statistics is hugely important for the future of this movement. The OECD has been involved in the Beyond GDP movement for the last 10 years, and this time has seen a sea change in the attitudes of official statisticians and government in accepting that it's important to measure beyond macroeconomic statistics, and we need better measurement of people's well-being. But this isn't going to really matter unless we also get citizens involved in this movement and bring the data to the people. This matters, first of all, purely from a democratic point of view. For example, last month we had the Scottish referendum, which was a hugely important decision that a lot of people had to make, and it became a very emotional and bitter debate because people felt that they didn't have the information they needed to judge what the best decision was for their future. And that information's out there, it's just not made available in an easily accessible format. And technology allows us the potential to do this. And another issue is that a question that we get asked quite often, and it came up in the last workshop, is it's all very well measuring beyond GDP, but how does this really affect policy? What's the actual link? And getting the public involved is a key part of this, because policymakers, they may accept that it's important to measure these issues, but they need to be made to care and to see that it's important to change policy. And getting citizens behind this and putting pressure on issues that are important for their well-being is a huge part of this. So I'm going to finish there, and we're going to move on to the first session, which is about communication. We have a number of interesting examples from official statistics and government initiatives from around the world. So first of all, I'm going to pass over to Zoe Hartland from the UK's Office of National Statistics Data Visualisation Unit.
Hi, thank you. As Kate said, I'm from ONS and the Data Visualisation Centre. I've worked on the current interactives for personal wellbeing and also for measures of national wellbeing, and also I've worked on interactive products to do with the census and economic variables, so I've got a bit of background in all kinds of data presentation. Today I'm going to talk about our wellbeing wheel and the suite of interactive products that go alongside it, and basically the evolution, the journey that it's taken for us to get there. So it started in 2010 and 11 when we began a consultation stage about what is wellbeing, and we developed a visual brand within our design team. So here's some examples of initial posters and flyers and the cover report. And really this was the initial work on wellbeing, and that design we hope is carried through our products. I think the design team was initially approached by the wellbeing team to present the wellbeing data and build the existing brand into the work. The initial thoughts were, it's basically kind of a table of lots of different indicators, so we could present this in the form of a table. But actually, presenting something in a table is very linear, and it prioritises things. Whatever's at the top immediately somehow becomes more important to the viewer. So the design team came up with a concept of a circle and presenting these indicators, as you can see here, arranged with no beginning or end. So there was no decision consciously made about which indicator was most important. The circle presents everything equally, and it was really well received. It's very striking and attention-grabbing. Just zoom into this bottom section here. You can see there is also a bit of an issue in that we have a lot of people turning their heads to read the text, which is fine, but if you're wanting people to pick up a message instantly, then you want to be presenting the data as clearly as possible to them. So we clearly had a bit of a barrier there to communications. The other problems that we have is if it was presented on the internet, it's quite small and you have to zoom in and out, and it's just a little bit fiddly to use. So although it works well as a poster, the text size is all just a little bit wrong for web, and especially for mobile. If you presented this to someone on their phone, they'd probably be quite disappointed they had to zoom in so far to read any of it. Other cons to this are the fact that it's design orientated. Anything you need to change has to be individually changed and crafted, and there's not actually that much space for information about the data. We have a basic descriptor and the value, but there's no means for anything about comparisons in there. We've no idea whether these indicators are going up or down and what it's showing. So something that was then looked at was an interactive version. And here is our interactive flash version of the Wheel of Wellbeing. So you can see it's based on the static version, and the user can spin the wheel and read a bit more about the indicator that they're interested in. There's a bit more room for data annotations, so we've got the source at the side and also comparison, which is useful. It shows what's changing, what's improving, what isn't improving. We did have some discussions about red, amber, green status to indicate whether the well-being indicator was actually changing for good or worse, but this was removed as it was seen as to be quite a difficult judgment for us to make, and I think those kind of decisions, especially at our office, are quite difficult because we don't want to be seen as judging people for whatever the responses are. So in our capacity as a data presenter, we are purely presenting the facts and the figures rather than our opinion of what's causing change or whether we think things are good or bad. So this is the flash version, and although it's an improvement on the static version, it solves some problems like the readability of the text and more space for annotations. Because it's built in Flash, it's not compatible with tablets and it's not mobile friendly. So although if you're viewing it on a laptop or computer, that's fine. As soon as you want to access it when you're out and about on your mobile phone, you'll get an error message and it just won't display. So that was something we were interested in solving with our next iteration of the wheel. Sorry, forgive me for flicking around. So this is our new updated HTML5 version of the Wellbeing Wheel. You can see the appearance of it is a little bit different, but we've tried to preserve the design as much as possible. And this has so many advantages over the Flash design. The first being that it is now mobile compatible and tablet compatible, so you can view this on any device. And effectively it's been made future-proof, so hopefully as web technologies changes, it will still be viewable. And the other advantage is that it's much easier to update than the old Flash version. If we flick back here for a moment, you'll see that there's a bar to indicate each data value as a small bar chart. And however, the design team who created this, each time a data variable changes, they have to physically go into the Illustrator file and redraw that bar. So if all the indicators change, there's an awful lot of design work behind that also has to change. And maintaining this wheel is a very big job. Whereas with the new wheel, the values are data driven, so you can effectively change a value in a text file, which I'll show you. If you look at medium to high happiness, the indicator, and the central values, I'll show you how easy it is to just change those. So this is the data file that goes alongside. And if I just refresh it, you'll see the bottom value has changed. Now there's a data file for each indicator and also a data file for the data contained in the wheel. So there's a little bit of editing needed to change everything, but it's that easy to change values. Nothing is difficult when you have to change a value. You just type a new one in and resave. So for us, that is a major advantage in terms of maintaining this. I'll just bring up a large version there of the data file that drives the center portion of data. So it's very readable as a human, and in fact we have passed this from the visualization center on to the wellbeing team, and they update their own files and just pass it back to us for QA. We don't have to update it ourselves, which is an advantage to us because we can work on other things. These are some of the social media responses of Twitter regarding the wellbeing wheel, and they're all really positive, which is great. But if you read a bit more into these, they're actually quite general positive things. There's nothing awfully personal there, and I think that personal aspect is really what gets people going on social media. If they can say something about where they live or what's happening to them or something that relates to them, then they're much more likely to share it with other people than just saying, oh, I quite like this. So that personal aspect we're really kind of keen to concentrate on in future. And this outreach is really important to us. We get all kinds of people sharing our interactives, and I think that engagement is really what we're after. So as well as the wellbeing wheel, we've developed a suite of other products, and the wellbeing interactive content is all presented together, as you can see here. There's a whole host of things that you can play with as a user, and each interactive will link to the others if you want to switch between them. So you'll see that there's a kind of a theme of constant change here. So these are the initial personal wellbeing products we produced, showing the distribution of responses for the personal wellbeing categories of life satisfaction, happiness, anxiety, and how worthwhile people's lives seemed to them. So we've got the distribution and then regional analysis, and we battled with some quite interesting concepts here. So that was the last year's, and then this year's we've redesigned the theme a little bit because we wanted to present things to make them look a bit more official, if that's the right word. The previous products, although the design was nice and fitted in with the rest of them, we felt that it was a bit playful, and we wanted to try and present these as a more serious data issue. So we remapped the design a little bit, and you can see it's basically the same data with an extra year, but hopefully you'll agree that the design there is a little better. So I'll show you some of these in action. So we've got the distribution here, which allows you to switch between years and show the change. You can compare a year to any other year and switch between categories like so. So that one's the distribution of responses from 0 to 10 for each question. So to what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile? This one is the average, so life satisfaction in this example for each region. And you can see that we have this kind of clustering of responses around the average, which is normal, and you would expect that. But in order to make sure we weren't fooling people into showing that there was massive change, we've made sure we're presenting the data from the full range of 0 to 10. We've added in elements such as these buttons, so you can really zoom in on the detail, but you can see the whole picture. And our background as kind of statisticians wants to make sure that all these things come right through to the outputs of our data, and we don't just show someone, for example, this bar chart where they think, wow, there's quite a lot of variation there, but actually if you zoom out again, there is variation, but it is slight. The last product, I'll zoom out a little bit, is this one, which is concerned with the response categories that people selected. So life satisfaction, worthwhile, and happiness each have the same scale. So 0 to 4 is considered to be low life satisfaction. If you look at the scale across the bottom just here, we've highlighted that area of the scale that it corresponds to, because when you switch to anxiety, the actual range of values switches. So this concept is quite difficult for users to grasp, that 3 of the categories are the same and the 4th is different. So if I just click on anxiety here, you'll see that the actual scale has changed. The number of responses in each response category has altered. So hopefully that visual indication of something will help users understand that difference, because that's been quite difficult when writing about this to get through to the user. This was another product that was produced, and this is a much more personal product. So it shows the same personal well-being categories and their responses throughout the UK. So it shows the different local authorities here, and you can see that life satisfaction in Scotland is much higher than, say, in London. Zoom in there a little bit. And you can see certain pockets of areas. So Rutland, for example, they're very satisfied with life at the moment. And this visual presentation of the data we found to be invaluable, really. If you saw that data in a table, it wouldn't have the same impact. A user would just not be engaged with it. A series of numbers and local authority names, they just wouldn't delve down into the data and see that pattern for themselves. And it also allows you to select the area you live in and see the detail. So mousing over the charts will tell you certain areas, and you can select, for example, the time series for Nottinghamshire will show you there's been very little change, but if there has been any, it will indicate that. So the responses we got when this was published were, again, positive, but much more personal in nature. And we had people like, I've got Harriet Baldwin here, who's an MP, saying, personal well-being in Worcestershire is improving. More to do, but we're blessed to live where we do. And that outreach and visibly seeing that kind of person get engaged with the product is kind of where we want to be. We've got all kinds of people here, so from health, we've got council members, MPs, and just the general public who are all engaged with this type of product. And this guy here saying that London is a miserable place to live. Money shopping and pricey housing is so depressing. Not a positive message, but it's really positive that he's engaged with the product that much. So, looking forward to the future, this personal aspect is something we really want to concentrate on, and we haven't done much with well-being yet on this theme, but with census we have. And this is a product that we released earlier in the year, and it's a quiz about how well you know your area. So it asks someone to enter their postcode. I'll just come out in my slides instead of the actual interactive version. Ask someone to enter their postcode, and it highlights their local authority and starts to ask questions about where they live. It challenges their perceptions of what is going on in their area. So, for example, I'm not sure you can all read that, but it says, for every 100 people, how many are aged 65 or over in your area? So it'll ask you to make a guess. I'm not going to think about these too much. And submit your answer, and then it shows you how right or how wrong you are, and will score you on that. So there's a series of 10 questions, and you can go all the way through. It'll do the same thing, and at the end it will give you a score. And we found that this was really shareable. We had lots of people sharing it with each other. We had MPs sharing it with each other. MP's son was challenging someone else to look at their area and feedback. And that personal aspect is something that we're really interested in. We don't collect any of the data at the moment that the respondents actually give us, because in the UK people are renownedly suspicious of the government and they don't like things being collected. So whilst this was a test and we'd not done anything like this before, we just thought we'll throw it out there and see what the response is. So we weren't actually collecting any of the information, but there's definite scope there for collecting the responses and then doing comparisons about perceptions, how people perceive their area compared to how it really is, or how people perceive their well-being compared to the average, for example. So in terms of well-being, we've been talking about creating a personal well-being calculator, which would, our first ideas were to allow people to indicate how their personal well-being was for a number of variables, and then we would give them a score. But we felt that this was quite judgmental for a government department to do, and we'd be coming into quite a few difficulties there if we were actually scoring people. So I think what we're considering is showing people where their response lies on a distribution of responses. So we'll be locating them based on their response, which is a much easier thing to do than give someone a score and say how they're feeling, or how happy they are. We think you're this happy, we think you're that happy. I think that's quite difficult for us to do, but we can say compared to everyone else, you're placed here, and that's much easier and much friendlier. We think we'll receive positive feedback from that rather than negative. Something else we've been approached about is preparing some form of visualization for the economic well-being variables, because we've done a lot with personal well-being, but in measures of national well-being there are a wide variety. So I think we're going to start expanding in future and see what else is around, and hopefully do something with the economic data. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very interesting. We have time for some questions now, if anybody has anything they like to ask. Zoe now. Is it Lorena?
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, and maybe I missed it, but for all the Twitter that you had, when people are playing with the different visualizations, is there a share function? You can.
Yeah, you can share everything by Twitter or Facebook. There is a share button that people can use, so we've incorporated that in. But we're not sure how much people do actually use that. I think from looking at our metrics, I think most people just copy the URL. They don't actually use the share functionality within each product. So although it's there, we're not sure how valuable that is. Sharing it is valuable, but that actual button we're not sure about.
Thank you. And then I was wondering whether there was a comment section anywhere on the site, and if there had been any discussion about creating maybe a kind of login where people could get information and become more of a part of a network. I ask because we are discussing the same things internally, whether to move in that direction for the Better Life Index. And what kinds of comments, if you get any?
We don't have a comment section, but people are welcome to give feedback either via social media. We have quite an active social media team that responds to things as and when they happen. But also, I think because of the range of data that ONS produces, it's not just well-being, it's all kinds of GDP data or census data, and with the reaction we'd get from things like possibly the migration data, it's not appropriate for people to comment in some respects, because we can imagine that they would turn into, there'd be a need for the comment section to be heavily moderated. So it's kind of a blanket decision that there's not a comment section which is associated to each interactive product. But when things like the Wellbeing Wheel or the interactive maps syndicated. For example, The Guardian syndicated the wellbeing maps, and they have a comment section. And so we can read people's thoughts and comments from that area, which is very interesting. But I don't think it would work being hosted on the ONS site, because that would be quite difficult for us, I think.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. When you designed that setup, were you thinking about engaging citizens or the civil society, meaning the organized civil society, or how did you target your audience?
I think it's a bit difficult because I wasn't personally involved in the initial design process, but having spoken to people that were, I think they were trying to be as inclusive as possible. So both, I think, they were trying to make it appealing for like policymakers and internal stakeholders, make it, you know, visual and impacting, so that people wanted to read more and wanted to promote well-being, but also for it to be really engaging elsewhere outside of the organisation. And I think it's important to get that level of engagement right, because you do need both parties. If you're just appealing to one, then you're kind of missing something.
Trevor, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, very interesting. I just wondered whether, presumably, ONS owns the copyright for that design and functionality, and I just wondered, you know, it would be so useful to, you know, potentially a local authority or a health authority, whether any thought's been given to making, you know, even at a cost, making the tools available so that a local area could put into it aspects that were important in their view.
Oh, it isn't copyrighted. The beauty of new technology is that it's open source, and that if you're a web developer, you can go in there, look at the code, and change it. So we've had inquiries actually from, let me just get it right, I think it was Trinidad and Tobago, and also from Northern Ireland, inquiring whether they could use the wheel. And, you know, we've said, if you've got the expertise to go ahead and change and adapt and recreate something for yourself, then we're happy to share. So it's all open source. That's the beauty of HTML5 as well, instead of Flash, where everything was kind of hidden behind the scenes. People can go in and have a look.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Just two questions. The first one is about the well-being is a multidimensional phenomena, and is represented by the wheel that you have showed. But have you tried to synthesize the different dimensions of the well-being showed by the wheel? So have you tried to resume or using synthetic indexes? This is the first question. The other one, if you have a policy about publication of the results related to the statistical significance of the differences between 2 years. For example, if the different figures for 1 year and the others are different, but if this difference is due to the sampling variability, or if you have some policy about it.
So I'm not from the wellbeing team. I work as like in a different team that's purely to do with the interactive content and designing that. But I have spoken to them before about statistical significance, because my background is in statistics. And early on, when we were talking about the new personal wellbeing products, they were very focused on differences and change, and it was something that we, as designers, wanted to make sure they'd considered when they were presenting their outputs, that that change was highlighted as being significant or not. And I know that that work has either been done or is in the process of being done to highlight whether there is a significant difference, but I'm not sure what the result of that work was. So we'd looked into some presenting some data for them, and I think it was regarding how the UK was sitting in relation to other countries, and I think we, if my memory serves me correctly, I think we said that we wouldn't produce an interactive for that because the way that we would present it, it wouldn't be fair to the data. It wouldn't be statistically correct. So we try and concentrate as much as possible on both the design and making sure that data is as robust as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have one last question, but maybe it's something we can discuss at the end of the session because it's maybe a question for all the presenters as well. I really picked up on the fact that you said that it's how important it is to make the data personal and that this is a big issue for your work going forward. And it seemed that when you were talking about personal, the main ways that you were doing this is by local data. Personal meant local as far as your experience is shown. Another way that you could make data personal and make people care about the data and have an emotional attachment to it is by presenting it in a context and presenting a story around that data. But I know that this is a big debate for official statistics and government government agencies because there's a fine line between storytelling and a biased presentation of the data. I just wondered, from your experience, what is this debate at the ONS? Because I was interested, on the one hand, there's this big need to make the data more personal and accessible, but then there was also the press material that was seen to be not serious enough, so you had to make it more serious, and there seems to be a tension there, and I just wondered, are you aware of what the feeling is in the ONS about storytelling and making data accessible?
I think that storytelling aspect is really interesting because it's not just well-being, it is all aspects of data, and we are, as an office, trialling things to see if they work. And I think with storytelling, I think that story is quite the word story is quite difficult because it immediately conjures up fiction, and so we need to be wary of saying things as stories. But aside from that, like data narration and giving extra context, I think is really important. I can maybe show you an example of some things that we have worked on and we do think have been successful. Let me just skip to. So this is again, it's a census product on commuting, and this is the kind of storytelling aspect that we've been looking at. So you can read the story on the left and it will show you on the right how that is visualised and present the data in a meaningful way. So like pages of the book with a picture, kind of that story is shown, and this is all interactive, so it shows the level of commuting. So you can see that there's a big focus on London down there. It's probably quite small, but if you zoom in, you'll see London somewhere. It's a little pocket of heavy commuting going on around London. So it talks about out commuters, in commuters, the London magnet, there we are again, just showing that pull of London. And then after you've read the story, as it were, you're allowed to come out of that story and you're given the data and the interactive product as a data explorator. You can mouse over each area and look at commuting within that region and get a bit of extra information. So that's the kind of thing we've been playing with regarding storytelling. With well-being, we haven't done anything yet, but as we pursue this kind of theme throughout the office, hopefully it will kind of come into every product that we produce. But it is a difficult area because we want to make sure that we're unbiased and we are presenting the facts, not someone's opinion. So in some areas it's harder than others.
Great. Thank you very much, Zoe. That was really interesting. Our next presentation is from Mary McCaughey from Eurofound. Thank you.
Bear with me now as I try to come to terms with your machine. Is that right?
Yeah, should work.
Should work.
Oh.
Well, that's a good start. Well, there's a good start of communication channels through the web. I should maybe just start by introducing myself. I'm from Eurofound, which is the short version of a very long and laborious name, which is the European Foundation for the Improvement of Living and Working Conditions. So you can understand why we became Eurofound. But the basis of what we do is exactly that. It is an organisation, an agency, an EU agency that was established about 40 years ago. We're 40 years old next year, 2015, to actually look at research in the areas of living and working conditions. And since then, we've expanded to take in other aspects, which would have been the impact of restructuring and labour market change across the European Union. We've been doing this consistently for the last 4 decades. And it's interesting for us that while when we started, the web didn't even exist, neither did email or anything else, we have been communicating and disseminating the same kind of information, and really with an awful lot of the same problems and issues and challenges facing us in terms of policy, as we have done at the start, which we are doing today. So what I'm going to go through today really is, is to give you an idea of what it is that we do and how we've been facing some of the problems. And I'm very interested in Zoe's because already she's raising some of the same challenges and difficulties that we have faced in our work. And of course, when I see how complex and multifaceted her presentation was in the wheel, you have to multiply that for us by 28 countries. I talked to the OECD, I know you have even more. But we are talking about 28 countries and talking about languages for each one of those and dimensions. And in some of the surveys that I will talk about, where we go to not just national level, but the kind of nuts to department levels that you were talking about previously. The other aspect is that obviously what we work with is not only well-being information. It's far broader than that. It deals with the whole range of social and work-related policy issues across the European Union. So again, what's relevant to perhaps the UK may not be distinctly relevant for Lithuania or Latvia or the other Baltic states. And then the multidimensional aspect of the work that we do. We look at research from different dimensions. So we look at it from the working conditions aspect, but then of course from the living conditions, quality of life. And then we look at it using different forms of research. So we could have case studies, we could have surveys, we could have original research, and all of that has to come together, and we have to think about how do we communicate that, and as you talk about, telling some kind of coherent story to the user that makes sense, because the user, for the most part, the policymaker, does not necessarily want to know the disparate aspects of what we are producing, but they do want to know what this means in terms of policy decision making into the future. So primarily we are still using now today the web as our main communication channel. This I'm showing you here, this is a snapshot, if you like, a screenshot of our new website, which is not online yet. They are working on it in Dublin as I speak, but this is where we're going. And one of the reasons that we've gone with this new version of our website is to tackle some of the issues which Zoe was talking about earlier on, having compatibility with Flash, for example, so that you can access an awful lot of our information on tablets and mobile devices. We also, of course, still print documents, fewer and fewer and fewer, but still we do print documents. And you will see that it's a common thread amongst organisations, government organisations and international organisations. We do like to print documents. A lot of it is for our branding, I suppose. A lot of it is because we still feel that we want to have hard copies of branded items for conferences and to disseminate to our users. But more and more we see that really the downloads are happening online. Our number of downloads are increasing systematically while we reduce the printed volume and output. And what you see here are the reports that we have, the secondary analysis research reports directly related to our well-being in terms of the European Quality of Life Survey. This here is a series which we created to develop this response to this sort of storytelling, the narrative around particular issues. So political trust and engagement, what does it mean? Where can we source all the information that we have on political trust and engagement? Where it has declined so radically, what does that mean? And where does it touch on the different aspects of the work that we have looked at? So drawing on our different areas of research and telling the user what we're doing. But specifically for today, talking about Eurofound's well-being information, primarily that is sourced from two main areas. The European Working Conditions Survey, which has been around for the last 20 years or so, and the European Quality of Life Survey, which is in its third iteration. These are two surveys that we run in Eurofound. We have a third survey, which is the European Company Survey, and that looks at working practices within companies. But here today I'm going to have a quick look with you at the European Quality of Life Survey, which has in fact 26 indicators of well-being within that. It's run every 4 years. It goes across the 28 member states, and it also looks at several of the candidate countries and Norway and several others. It has a random face-to-face approach to sampling the population, and it looks at a range of issues. So you see there the employment, income, education. They are there systematically on a 4-year basis. But then you have the subjective areas, which is where we're looking at the well-being aspects, where people's level of happiness, satisfaction, their quality of lives, and how they perceive the quality of their societies. And what's very interesting for me there, and what Zoe was just saying, I don't know if you noticed, but when she pulled out one of the zones there of satisfaction, I think of life, there was the Eurobarometer statistics. And what we did was, when the Eurobarometer ran their survey, in 2012, they ran an interim survey using the questions that we had used in our previous survey on quality of life. So we were able to see an interim result pre-crisis and sort of during the crisis to see how that engagement, how that trust in public institutions had changed. And that was a very useful aspect of us trying to tell the users what was happening in the world that they were living in real time. Here I'm just really looking to show you the depth, if you like, and the spread of what we are doing across the 34 countries, and to show you that we do have it drilled down by region and by urban area. The 26 indicators in the EQLS, most of you here will know well-being measures, and we are looking at them. What we have done is we have evolved over time, so the first wave of the EQLS didn't include all of these indicators, so they're not always a trend analysis is not possible across all of them, but that's something that we will watch into the next phase, which we will now be preparing, which is in 2016. So when you look at this is what I'm going to come to later on. Each one of these, we had to see ways of actually being in a position to allow us to present this well-being data in a way which allowed all member states, all 34 countries, to be able to see how they could picture themselves and place themselves against other countries, against the EU average, against other clusters of countries, and again, in terms of specifically the well-being statistics. Here, this is the Working Conditions Survey, and there's a whole range of well-being statistics on the Working Conditions Survey, which of course is not the same cohort of people, so therefore we can't interchange the results, but we can use some of them, and I'll talk about that later. How do we use this? And I think this is what is interesting, is that we're able to kind of bring together some of these well-being statistics and produce things which would allow us to develop indexes. WHO has a mental health, mental well-being index, and we are able to contribute to that. Here, for example, on the mental well-being of workers, we're able to input to that, but at the same time, we have something on the gender gap because we're able to filter and break down by gender in terms of the information that's available to us with the Working Conditions Survey and the responses to that. What's particularly interesting for me here to show you is, in terms of sharing this data, we have another agency which is called the European Institute for Gender Equality, which is based in Lithuania. And they were able to take this data and they used this as the basis of some of the information that they were using to create a gender index at European level. So the information that we were sharing with them, or more generally, was then picked up by another EU agency, which then allowed them to create a separate index. So again, it was about us trying to share this information, which has a bigger impact in the longer run. Again, you'll all be aware of the current debate of the social exclusion of young people, and young people across the European Union specifically, high levels of unemployment, high levels of disengagement, very high levels of prospective exclusion. So looking across these different well-being indicators that we have in place and then breaking them down by the filters of age, you are able to come up with an index which shows the perceived social exclusion of young people. And this then we can feed into other aspects of our work where we look at those. I don't know if you're aware of the most recent research that we carried out, and where you look at the cost to the European taxpayer or to the European economy of young people remaining disengaged and outside the system into the future. And we're talking about, I think it's at 158 billion euro in terms of lost income. There, I'll come back to that later. Here's another aspect that I wanted just to indicate to you here, why and how it is interesting to have this information at different levels. One of our questions here is, in all countries, there sometimes exists tension between social groups. In your opinion, how much tension is there between each of the following groups? And we divide it up into these different questions. People respond and they say a lot, some, no tension. If you look at this slide here, which is probably easier to read on there, this is an OECD Society at a Glance Tolerance report. And here, if you just zone into what you're looking at here, which is France, and the answer to the question up here says the share of people who think that the city or area where they live is a good place to live for immigrants from other countries. And there you have, it's at 75, which is relatively good. But if you break it down to what we asked, the same questions about what I said there about tension, and if you look here between ethnic or racial groups, and if I go in here to France, you will see there that 50% of people are saying that there is a lot of tension between ethnic or racial groups in that country. So what I'm trying to show here is that the different dimensions that we are able to provide in our survey, if you like, it also serves not only as presenting that data for users to see, but it also allows us to say, well, perhaps it serves a purpose in terms of actually asking a further question or trying to drill down into the what is behind the answers to these significantly or not different responses to this particular issue. So I think on its own, it allows us to develop perhaps different indicators, different questions in terms of building up our questionnaires for the future. Oops, there we go. So, as you've seen here, we were looking at using the web to communicate this data better and better. We're facing the issue on an ongoing basis of an increasing number of member states, because already we're looking at an increased number of EU member states, so up to 28, but we also have the candidate countries, and we have several countries such as Norway and Iceland who actually want to participate in our surveys, and so we need to present that data also. The complexity of the data in terms of the questions that we're asking, numbers of questions, and then the filters that we're using on that, breaking them down by income, by age, by gender, currently is the case. And then presentational difficulties, we talked about some of that already. How do you actually present that online in a way which is accessible to the user? And of course, we're talking about a particular type of user here. We're not necessarily talking about the ongoing researcher or software application developer, which we can talk about later. And then talking about, from our perspective, the graphical comparisons. That's very important, because obviously, as an EU agency, our unique added value is not to tell the UK or France what you know best. I mean, you know better about your own countries and why things are the way they are than we could possibly imagine or present to you. But what we are in a position to do is to say, well, where do you fit within the overall EU, or how do you fit compared to other countries in the same area? And then in terms of trend analysis, how have you evolved over the years, comparatively speaking, to those other countries? And then the demand for multilingual information, that will be my heartbreaker, because it really is a very difficult thing you must ask questions in those languages, obviously, so the questions are all available, but then the responses are equally, they must be available in all those languages. And then any narrative that you create around that must equally be available in all those languages. So while you can change stories or create stories which are relevant to a particular agenda when you're only dealing with one language, it's not something you do very easily when you're talking about 28 plus, well, in this case 24 plus languages, just in terms of time and delivery, and obviously accuracy and quality comes into that also. And then the increased demand for interactivity. We talked about it earlier. Interactivity in terms of, yes, our new site, for example, asks for those comments, asks for people, whether they like what they've seen, whether they agree with what they've seen, whether they find fault with what they've seen, whether they are critical of what they've seen. And that is an increasing demand that we need to respond to in our new website and the way that we communicate. But equally, from an agency perspective, we have been asked to make our results more accessible through the website. And we need to be able to prove that we have had an impact and that we have communicated that via our website. The agencies are also being asked to be increasingly transparent. So to respond to that and the fact that there's this need for two-way communication, we are developing different improvements. So we wanted to do what I've just said here, to do it better, to look at how we could facilitate that user engagement and to complement what we already have. And I'm not going to go into the details of this. I don't think it's particularly interesting for you here, but it did require a lot of what Zoe was talking about earlier. We had to look at different technological approaches to this so that we would be in a position to develop something which responded to our needs. And we are now in a place where, this is where we do want it to work, yes, okay, where this is more or less, this is a new version of this will now be developed, and I hope we will be able to, the next time I'll be able to show that to you even more so. But if I was to look at, I have health and public services. This is the results of the European Quality of Life Survey 2012. And here you will see, this is the way that we have it at the moment. Here you will see the map of Europe. And if I scroll over this, at the moment you will be able to see, is your household able to make ends meet? And if I go in there, I'll see in Germany, it'll come up over, as I scroll, 4.8% say with great difficulty, and the majority say fairly easily and easily, so that you've got over 50%, which seem in Germany not to have that great a difficulty. But if you then, which you might wish to do, go down to the youngest cohort here, and you look at with great difficulty, and if you go into France, for example, with great difficulty, here we have with great difficulty, some difficulty or with difficulty, you see that there's a large proportion of people who are more moving into here. If I look at the same in Germany, although that's probably not such a good example to be using Germany in this particular case. But here, for example, in Spain, where Spain has the highest rate alongside Greece of unemployment of young people, you can see here that is your household able to make ends meet with some difficulty, with difficulty and with great difficulty is the majority in that case. So you can already scroll over there. In terms of just its interactivity, here I can go in and I can look by gender. So then I can decide that I'm only going to look at female. And here, what I particularly like is then you're able to decide how you want to present that data. So here I can show female and male, and you can see with great difficulty through to very easily by gender. And this is by Austria, but if I want to take it and I want to go in to see what the situation is in Germany, you apply that to there, and it in real time will provide you with that. What is also quite nice is it'll give you different representations of this so that you can present it in the way that you wish. And this particular one here will allow you to, for example, if I want to say perceived tension between poor and rich people, and I want to say by income, you will then be able to immediately see, using all of these countries where, for example, Portugal is a lot of tension by income, or if you like, you can go by the highest income level through there. So you can see, basically, I'm not going to go through the entire survey mapping tool, but you can see that similar to what Zoe was there, the idea is to try and allow the user go in, and if you are interested in your particular country, you can compare that country with another country. If you wish to only compare yourself, for example, with the European Union, you can see where Germany is vis-a-vis the European Union on all of these things. And for these, and that's the slightly advanced element of this, down here, the export visualization capacity is indicated here. So here you can provide it in whichever way you want. If it's in HTML or you want a URL page or PNG or whatever, you can decide how you want to export that. So therefore you can export it into your own presentations, reports, whatever it is that you wish to use. How am I going to get back into this now? There we are. Okay. Yeah. So that's where we developed, and hopefully the next time it will be even further developed when I am gone home this week. It's not moving for me now. Never mind. There we go. So in terms of into the future, these are the issues that I think that we have faced over the last little while. I've indicated specifically in terms of the presentation of our well-being information and how we have explored this survey mapping tool and upgraded it so that it can be accessible via tablets and mobile devices. I think, though, there is a bigger picture, and I think Trevor and I discussed briefly about the big data and where we can actually access data into the future. The surveys that we have would be considered to some degree big data, in the sense that there is an awful lot of data which we cannot or should not or feel we cannot always share for various reasons. However, there is increasing pressure to share that data. At the moment, we put our data sets into the UK Data Service archive, and we provide them with that, and then researchers and others can access that data set at a later stage on request. That allows us to see who has access to the data, who is using the data, and to be able to track to some degree what they've done with that data. What we're looking at now is whether we can actually allow it be available for software application development. And at the same time, this here, and I'm not sure how many of you know this is the EU Open Data Portal. And the Open Data Portal is something that the European Union's Publications Office has now launched. It's a portal through which we as agencies, and indeed any of the national departments, can also place their data, and it is accessible to everyone. You can see here that they have a developer's corner, which allows any developer to come in, access this data and manipulate it and use it for whatever it is that they wish to do. You can go through here and see who's on this portal. But the idea that the office has, and you can see here that Belgium government data, you have a whole range of EU agency data, you've got the World Bank, you'll have various inputs from other international organisations. But what the data portal is really looking at is trying to encourage us all to share our data so that that data that has been financed, in our case, by the EU taxpayer, is available to all, free of charge, for people to use and to use onwards. Now, I'm sure we'll have a further discussion about that. There are tensions involved in that. One is creating the expectation that data will be available for all, and that data, or the fear, the concern that data will be misinterpreted, that we no longer own that data, that data is not accompanied by our interpretation of that data. And of course, researchers, to a large degree, would feel uncomfortable with that. I think that's probably the biggest tension that we're facing at the moment in terms of delivering that data. We currently have some of our information on the EU Open Data Portal. That's an open portal. The UK Data Service, you have to apply and get it. So we're sort of straddling both at the moment, and bit by bit I think we will move in that direction. But the other aspect that I think is interesting is that we're now looking at trying to create an interim which would allow us to ask some of the questions that you saw here on our survey mapping tool to users like you online, so that we would then potentially, at the moment it's a pilot project, use your input on those questions. If we were to use our mental health wellbeing index, for example, and we consistently asked you that on an ongoing basis, we could then perhaps consider using that information, although methodologically it would not be similar to the survey itself, to complement or to feed into the development of further questionnaires or topical focus into the future of the surveys. And that is, I'll just go here, and that is something that we are looking at, obviously not happily according to the computer, and the idea would be here to allow, and that's why I'm interested in what Zoe was saying, is what's the incentive of the user to do this, and it is to allow them to benchmark themselves against that average European, so that if they were to come in and ask those questions and provide answers for us, we would in turn be able to, in real time, take that information, calculate where it was that they would place themselves across the European Union, how that has changed, give them some sort of a trend analysis and publish that to them. It wouldn't be representative, and that of course is the issue that again is slightly tension-filled for the researchers. Their feeling would be that it's not sound, it's not robust, it's not methodologically validated. But what we are saying at the moment is that it could allow us have an indication of where perhaps we could focus any future iterations of the questionnaires and the topics that we would be outlining in a future wave of the surveys. So, yeah, and that's really the same then again. I'm not going to go into that further. So in terms of lessons learned, what we have seen is that once we upgraded the Data Explorer to ensure that people could access it, it went through the roof in terms of people's user sessions and how they used us. Their specific needs grew, so people now are requesting even further representation and bringing it down to different levels, at regional level, and asking for that kind of input from us. replication across the agencies. So we created this survey mapping tool. We now have 4 or 5 agencies across the network of European agencies who use the same data explorer tool. And I suppose what we have learned is that we need to be open about these things, but in terms of what we use as indicators of our performance of reaching policymakers, in terms of our indicators of communication success, etc., how do we manage that if we lose control of the data that we have? So we have to have a very a clear understanding with the EU Open Data Portal, with other agencies that use that data or that we provide that data to, that we will be referenced in the correct way, and that we will, for example, as I was very happy to see, come up as source Eurofound when other organisations are using or reproducing the information that we are making available freely. So that's one of the, I suppose, the major things that we would be interested in. And then just to give you an indication of how you can follow us, if you would like to make any comments on any of these, please do so. So that's it.
Thank you, Mary. That was a really interesting presentation. What's clear, and it was also clear in the last workshop, is this division between communication on the one hand and participation on the other hand is pretty artificial, and that's already coming through in these presentations, that when we're using interactive web platforms to communicate, that communication is actually two-way, and we can start to use the data that we're gathering as well in interesting ways. There are obviously a lot of limitations which we'll discuss more throughout the day, but there's some potential here as well to do some interesting work. Does anybody have any questions for Mary right now? Donatella.
Thank you, Mary, for your presentation. Very interesting. I think that you have touched, among others, a crucial point for a statistician, but and for the usage of open data, that is necessary to provide methodology to users. It's not sufficient to give data, but to help people to use data. And I say people, society, but when I think to policymakers, I think that not only they have to have data, especially in beyond GDP data, with a multidimensional, as a multidimensional phenomena, we can give, to know the phenomena well, we need a lot of data, but we must be able to synthesize the data in the debate about composite indicators, about synthetic index, and so on, because we need statistics, better statistics, but the final aim to drive policy decisions. So I think okay, just this.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next presentation, which is a highly interactive example. Emily Walter is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics census team, and she's presenting a really innovative use of app technology to communicate their data.
Thank you, Kate. I'll just introduce myself first. My name is Emily Walter and I'm from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I work in the 2016 population census team, and my specific work at the moment is actually developing a dissemination strategy for the 2016 census. Just as a background, the census in Australia is run every 5 years, and it aims to count every person in Australia on census night. So it's the largest statistical collection that the Bureau of Statistics undertakes. The last Australian census was in 2011, and the next one's going to be in 2016. But what I'd like to talk to you about today is an initiative from the 2011 census, and it's a game called Run That Town. And the game uses real census data to underpin it, but it's not a dissemination tool. It's considered a community engagement tool. So what I'll do is just tell you a little bit about the drivers for creating Run That Town, and then I'll show you a short video which summarises the game really very nicely. After that, I'll take you into some of the detail of the actual interface of the game and how the game is played, and then we'll go on to having a look at some of the indicators that might be considered when looking at how it's fared against its objectives. So there were two real drivers for developing Run That Town. The 2011 census was the first time that the Bureau of Statistics really invested in a large-scale public relations campaign, and that had the aim of enhancing support for the ABS and the census. And market research conducted throughout that campaign showed us that we needed to demonstrate to people the relevance of census data at a local level. They really didn't understand how it made any difference to them. Additionally, we did some analysis of response from previous censuses, and we discovered through that the likelihood of someone responding in the census was variable and based on a number of different social and geographic and demographic factors, including age and sex. And one of the most likely cross-section of the community to be missed were young adults, and in particularly young adult males. And so these were really the two main drivers for creating Run That Town. And Run That Town specifically had the aims of highlighting the value of census data and increasing access to the data and use of that data. One of the other relationship between this is that there's two goals within the census program that this specifically relates to. One is improving coverage of the population, and the other is to improve the quality of collected data, which relies so heavily on this voluntary compliance of people to participate. So I'll just show you a short video now of the that summarises the game, and I think I'll need someone to... Hopefully. Okay. Do you think will it work? Oh, it should just, there should be an option to just play when it's... If you can go to... yeah, it's in YouTube. And just search. I'll just search for Run That Town census, perhaps. Run That Town? Yeah, or one word. If you... Maybe use Run That, just make Run That Town one word. No, the first one, I think. Yep, the first one. Is there audio to go with?
But this information is important. It guides policy and planning decisions that will ultimately affect the lives of every Australian.
Can you start it from the beginning?
We wanted people to find out for themselves just how much these numbers... After more than 5 years of planning, preparation and processing, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released the latest census data. the most complete statistical picture of the Australian population to date. Unfortunately, to most Australians, it looks something like this. But this information is important. It guides policy and planning decisions that will ultimately affect the lives of every Australian. We wanted people to find out for themselves just how much these numbers matter. So, we took the data from every town in Australia and turned it into a game. Run That Town is tailored to every one of Australia's more than 2,500 postcodes. It uses real census data to make the game unique and relevant to the residents of every town. As you play, you get to make critical decisions for your neighbourhood. So, if you ever wondered what would happen if you were to add a casino, or an airport, or even a prison to your actual town, well, now you can find out. But be careful. The game models the behaviour of your locals on the real demographics of your postcode, so your choices can have a huge impact on your popularity. Luckily, the data can help you work out who will support your project and who will oppose it. With over 300 possible projects and random disasters to contend with, you'll get to see just how you respond under pressure. A local paper critiques your performance through articles that respond to your actions. Built with more than 100,000 words of customised copy, the equivalent of a 320-page novel, the content of the newspaper changes based on the popularity of your decisions. Ultimately, your townsfolk may hail you as a hero or run you out of town. But more importantly, Run That Town gives you a deeper understanding of just who lives in your neighbourhood. And by integrating real-world data tightly into the gameplay, Run That Town shows Australians their census data in a whole new light.
Thanks. So that's a really nice way of just getting a very brief summary of what Run That Town is. So I'll go in now and talk a little bit more about the game and show you some of the way it's played. So Run That Town is a game that can be downloaded from the App Store, free. It's currently only available for Apple devices, but it has been quite popular, and the ABS is looking at the feasibility of developing an Android-compatible version in the future. The ultimate goal, as we saw from the video, is to become the most popular civic leader that your town has ever seen. And you do that by, the game centres on town building activities, so you do that by building projects in your town. And that influences the growth and the direction and the happiness of your town. It uses real data, real demographic data from the 2011 census, and each player has a 10-year window to complete the game, and that's measured in months, where one turn is equal to 1 month. It also, every 5 years, or 60 turns, it updates the data. It conducts another census. And that's designed to emphasise the periodic nature of the actual census and the importance of collecting data that's accurate and to inform decision-making processes. So the game was designed to appeal to a wide audience, and emphasis is placed on immediate player engagement and satisfaction. So it uses a lot of humour and surprise to engage the player and really personalises that experience. So let's have a look. There are a number of starting screens that you go through before this one, which just basically is where you choose your postcode and identify yourself, give yourself a name and choose your gender, and then you can start the game. For the game itself to be successful, it's really important to guide new users through it. And so at the start of each new game, there's a tutorial which does this. And what it does is introduce the player to the key elements of the game. And this ensures that the concepts are introduced in a way that the player understands practically, that they're rewarded along the way, and that it prevents new users from failing too quickly. So it's designed to really catch new users to the game and draw them in. So as the tutorial goes through, it introduces you to things like funds and clout, and they're the two currencies that the player deals in. So you obviously need funds to build projects, and you need clout to persuade people. And the smiley face in the middle of the screen is an indication of your popularity, and the aim of the game is to maximise that. So throughout the game, proposals are offered to each player, and they're accessed through the dashboard at the bottom. You can see the little halo over it. And each proposal, when it opened up, provides a summary of what it's going to cost. So there's a cost in terms of the funds that you've got to do it and the clout, and it also has a summary of the sentiment of the community. So you can see there the positive is the blue centre, the local, and the negative is the red local. And that's the community sentiment is really where the player finds out about who their locals are. So if we delve deeper into that, if we tap on the positive local, you can learn about how large their demographic is and how passionate they are about this proposal. So in this case, the proposal is for a new community hall, and the positive local is Jane. She's very passionate about it, and she's also part of quite a large demographic in that community. On the other hand, the negative local, who's Rodney, is fairly uninterested in the proposal. He's just not very passionate about it, but he's also from a very small demographic in that community as well. So the fact that Rodney doesn't have a strong opinion about it and that Jane does have a strong opinion about it, you can see the very deliberate attempt here in this tutorial to guide this player through to a successful decision. The halo's even placed itself over the approve button, guiding the player to make the right decision. Once the approval's been made, construction begins, and as we saw in the little video, newspaper articles are written about the project. And this is what helps the player understand the impact of their decision and how it's impacted their community. So let's have a look at a newspaper article. You can see that it helps the player understand the ramifications of their decision, not just in real terms, in terms of the community, but also in their player terms. So they've got their 2 points increase in popularity because they made that decision to open the community hall. And the newspaper article talks about a much-needed community hall, a long-awaited community hall hosting the tutorial project that locals have been hankering after. So it's very clear that Jack made the right decision in this particular case. After that first step through and that first approval of in the game, the player is then, if you like, let loose in the game, and more proposals come through. So things like a television station or a cafe or an employment centre. Other than building proposals, there are events and incidents that periodically pop up throughout the play. So an event might be something like running a book fair or a knitting expo or something like that, something that's temporary. And it's handled in the same way that a project's handled, in that it costs money and it costs clout, and there'll be public sentiment for and against it. So decisions are made in the same way. Incidents can also pop up, and they're a more immediate thing that requires a decision to resolve it. It also costs money and clout, and also has an impact on the player's popularity. So in this case, the sports field that was developed had an expletive burned into the grass, and so it was important for that to be resolved. As the game progresses and the player makes decisions, the data in the game is updated as well, so it changes as the game changes. But at any point through the game, the player can then look at the census icon in the bottom dashboard there and have a look at the real census data. So that's just a couple of examples of the type of data that's displayed there. On the left side of the dashboard is the My Town icon, and that's where the player monitors their own progress in terms of their town. So from there they can swipe through the project proposals that they've done and review their decision on how it's going. So if we look into one of them, you can see that the information shows you how much it's costing every month to maintain that project. You can also link to the article that was written about that project to see whether it was well received or not. And there's an option to demolish the project if you feel it's not working out. The player can also, by swiping down underneath the smiley face, they can access their own progress in the game, which shows a bit of a chart of how their popularity is tracking and their score. And from here they can share their results through integration with social media, and you can see the Facebook and Twitter links there. And this uses peer-to-peer communication to advocate the census, essentially driving engagement with the census. So the game really puts the player in control of managing their town at a really detailed level. It provides an experience that is tailored to the individual, incorporating them directly into the game. It encourages and facilitates sharing of their stories by publishing their personalised infographics, and it helps the public to understand their role and contribution to Australia's future through participation in the census. So this is just a very brief overview of the game itself. It's actually very intricate and deep, and when you get into it, you'll see the interaction between each of the proposals and the projects and the incidents and the events and how it manages to track in your popularity. Additionally, various things pop up like a ranking of top 10 postcodes and things like that, so it connects you with other users of the data in that way. But I encourage you to get in and have a play of it to recognise how detailed it is. So I guess I was trying to work out how would we measure this initiative in terms of how it's tracked or how it's fared against its objectives. And some of the indicators of success for it might be these. So the usability testing was done during development. The ABS commissioned independent usability testing that evaluated the game against its objectives at 2 points through the development of the game. And it showed that participants gained an understanding of how their decisions were affecting their popularity. By paying attention to the locals more and their census data, they could make better decisions and improve their performance. These participants felt they'd gained a fuller appreciation of the census and how the data is used as a result of playing. Launch day success. Run That Town was launched on the 30th of April in 2013, and within days of the launch, the game was organically picked up by gaming blogs and reviewed by them, and that caused an initial spike of over 7,500 downloads. And the game jumped to number 1 in the entertainment category and number 19 in the top free apps chart in the App Store. Current use shows us that to date there have been around 75,000 downloads of the game and around 800 downloads just in the last month. And the game maintains a 4 out of 5 star rating in the App Store, and that's via peer and player review. And awards, the game has been formally recognised in a number of prestigious Australian and international award programs. And reviews. Users of the game are often surprised that Run That Town has been developed by a government agency, as they consider it quite fun and humorous and still being, while it's still being educational. It's one of the final reviews that advocates it. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to present Run That Town to you today, and I welcome any questions that you've got.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Does anybody in the room have any questions? Yes, Byron.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting. I would like to ask you if you have monitored any biases in the spatial distribution of the proposals. So are contributors, players, propose new stuff in certain areas and avoiding others in terms of geography or in terms of the underlying socioeconomic data of the areas? Thanks.
So the player at the start of the game selects a postcode, and that's the town that they're responsible for running. Oh, repeat the question. Saying that was there any monitoring of where the proposed were placed in terms of geography and underlying social data? Yeah. The data is run by postcode, so a player will select a specific postcode to run, and it's the data for that is just in that postcode. So the demographic data that underlies that is for that specific area. And it's designed specifically that way to bring it back to a local area so that people understand the impact and the effect of using data at a local level, at a community level.
I think what Viren was saying is there, I mean, I guess there's issues of ethics then about using the results of the game for research purposes, but are you saying that is it possible to see are there more developments in certain postcode areas compared to others?
Both that and I didn't realize at the beginning that it's confined to a postcode, only to a postcode. I thought it was for the entire town. So I wanted to see if there are biases inside the town, because we are facing some of that, of these problems, and I'm going to talk about it a bit. Okay, thanks.
I think that the data that underlies it is just purely the data from the census from that postcode. I don't think there's been any analysis on who plays which postcodes more or less, but that's an interesting thought. You can have up to 3 games going at the same time as a player, so you could choose different postcodes to understand more about that, but we would assume, I think, that mostly people are interested in their areas. The game is also designed, it's not designed as a dissemination tool, so it's not about a method for disseminating data rather than more engaging users in using the data to understand the importance of it at an individual and community level.
Thank you, yes.
Jean-Robert Suesser, I'm speaking now here from civic association perspective, organization from this perspective. I was surprised by the entry point chosen by ABS for this game, which is, if I understood well, because first, my English is not perfect. Second, you speak with an Australian accent, which doesn't help me. And looking in the other direction, which also doesn't help me. Popularity of the leader, or of the, okay. I could expect the census to be more presented, if I am thinking of what I think is a responsibility of an elected person in Europe, about looking after inclusiveness, which is in our society one of the most difficult issues. And inclusivity means tackling issues of people who are usually not the majority but the minority. And there is no evidence that the majority is fan of inclusiveness of the poorest, the more in difficulty, and so on. I expect the census data to be a tool to address not the popularity, but the inclusiveness agenda. So maybe I did not catch everything from the game. I'm very sorry for that. But how you react to my concern?
I think, again, I'd like to just reiterate that it's not about disseminating census data and getting people to research on the basis of that data. It is purely about trying to engage people with the data in a fun way, and that's the personal level that we're looking for. So the drivers for developing this tool were around people's understanding about the relevance of data to them in their community at a personal level, how them giving their data to the census makes a difference to them. And also we knew that there was a part of society that we were were losing connection with, and they were the young adults, particularly young adult males. And so this game is purely designed to engage them in the use of census data, not to actually use that data to make decisions or to research topics or provide any commentary that way. It's purely an engagement tool, and it's designed to be fun and engaging, simply to just get people active in using it.
Yes, very short follow-up. But why do you use the popularity arguments as so central in the game? Because what you say, for me, is not really linked automatically to popularity. It's to solve problems, to use data, but popularity, very close from populism. And I'm not sure that census is for populism.
I think it's just sort of playing on that desire to engage that user themselves as being, I think that's what stimulates people sometimes, is being popular. And I think it's just the notion of trying to pitch yourself against other people, perhaps in the same postcode, to try to boost your popularity. It makes people feel good, and I think that's part of what's engaging about it.
To me, it's a really interesting communication tool. I mean, not every communication tool is going to serve the same purpose, and this is really innovative, turning it into a game. And maybe we are a bit shallow, but when we download an app on our phone to play a game, maybe we are just interested in being top of the ranking and being the most popular rather than being the most
useful.
To be useful, it's true.
I would like very much, if you want to be useful, use the census.
Maybe we could have an alternative version of the app at some point then. Did you have a remark?
I was just going to say that I think that this is the issue that we all face in trying to connect with users, is that there will be people who use the data for that reason, to be useful and to research it, and there are other tools that we put out for that. This is not designed, I guess, for that reason.
So I had heard about this, and now I'm very happy to know more about what it was because of the innovation aspect. And also I had heard about it through another program that we have that is of interest based on the previous presentations. It's called Global Systems Science. And that's very similar to CAPS, only that CAPS is more at the level of individual communities, and Global System Science is much larger. And so I'm really fascinated by seeing it, and the fact that people do download it repeatedly, so adds to the use of data because they get more sophisticated as they get along. So my curiosity is another one, is one of the selections you showed was gender. So I'm reminded that when we studied Second Life, more people used female. Everybody used young, attractive, but more people used female. There were actually females. So I've never understood why, but anyway, why would you involve gender? I mean, you get more data back as to risk-taking or some other, what was the, I'm really curious.
Well, the game was developed by a professional group. It wasn't something that we did in-house, and I think that I don't know the details behind. Obviously, there has to be some personalisation at the start where you're selecting the area that you want to run and you're selecting your name, and I think gender is just one of those things that makes it personal for someone. But that's something I could try to find out from the game designers themselves. We don't get any information back from that, about the users.
I just had a question of my own, and if there are further questions, we can take those. I'm just interested, what was your inspiration? Because as far as I'm aware, and maybe you're aware of other examples, but are there other examples of official statistical agencies doing these kind of fun, educational, accessible apps? And if not, which I think not, where did your inspiration come from? And finally as well, is this something that you think could be useful for other official statistical agencies? Has your experience been that it's been an investment that's paid off, that it's worth making?
Yeah, so what was the first question again? Sorry. Inspiration, that's right. Well, it really came from that market research campaign, or the public relations campaign that surrounded the 2011 census, and that was the first time that the Bureau had ever done that. And there was very strong feedback through that people didn't understand the importance of their data. They didn't understand how it was relevant at a local level, within their community. How did it relate to them, or why does it matter? And I guess I wasn't personally involved in the idea of a game to do that, but I think that there was engagement certainly with external advertising agencies and the gaming, the professional gaming company that actually produced it to develop the game and the intricacies of it to engage with people. So I think that inspiration came from more creative bodies, but I think you're right that this is the first time that a national statistical organisation has put something like this out, and it was really designed for that purpose of making it relevant to people, making the data relevant to people, because it's the people that we rely on to provide us that data. Unless we give them an investment like this, something that's fun and engaging and humorous and surprising, that's what I think will draw people in and engage them and drive that participation in the census. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I should just introduce myself. I'm Alexandre Jost, and I'm the founder of a French think tank on well-being called the Spinoza Factory. And what we are trying to do in our think tank is to see how we can combine the interest of the people into the data, for the data, with their own power to contribute. And I'm wondering if there is not also a possible path, which would be, for instance, in your wonderful game, in some other edition of it, what is it that I could be doing myself in my community in order to improve or to become more popular? So right now it looks like I could be building a school, I could be building a new stadium, but it could also be what I could engage myself into some local NGO that would be changing the relationship between students and teachers or parents or whatever. And also another way could be to see whether some policy proposals would come to mind of the people in order to change those demographics or those well-being data. So I'm wondering what you think of having a way to get people to say what is it that is in their power or that they would suggest to the government or to the state that could be done in order to change the setting and also maybe become more popular.
Do you mean in terms of the game as another iteration in the game? Yeah, within the game, yeah. Sorry.
I think there is a very strong force we have inside, which is I see that, and what is it that I could be doing in order to change the situation?
I think that really that's a great idea for another kind of spin-off, I guess, from this type of game where you're not the leader running the town, but you're part of a community and you propose things that might help your community based on who it is that's local to the area. There's certainly, it has been a great investment for the Bureau, and there are intentions to continue this line as we move in towards the 2016 census and the public relation campaign that goes with that. but I think that's a great idea, and I'll certainly mention it.
I'll add one more thing. There is in France a foundation called Foundation Nicolas Hulot that is fighting towards sustainability, preserving the environment. And what they did is that on the side of such games or websites, they also added a list of actions, positive actions, which they called eco actions, éco-gestes in French, among which people could choose as a way to motivate themselves. So there could also be a list of 200, 300 actions that citizens could be taking that would change the actual setting and the data as a way so that people are feeling empowered as to what they could be doing.
I think that's a great idea, and I think that this was really the first foray into this area, and there's certainly lots of opportunity.
It's just very quickly. Firstly, congratulations to the Bureau and to Emily. Very interesting, and I think it was a very brave decision from where I sit to use statistics in that way. But the only way all of us are going to encourage that wider participation and use of statistics is by making statistics fun, because we all know that inherently statistics are not necessarily fun unless that's your job, I guess. And on that note, I just wondered whether whether the Bureau has thought about using the game as a sort of educational tool where it could be used in classrooms or by groups to sort of use that as a more wider way of using it rather than just on an individual basis. May be useful.
I don't know that has been considered. That there's the data that we've got back from this is that it has been very successful at an individual level, and the way people are using it, and the downloads and the reviews that it has had. I guess that the 2016 public relations campaign will look maybe a bit further to engaging in schools as well. But I'm not sure on that. But I totally agree that it's that often as statistical agencies we create many paths for very statistical savvy people to access data and to understand data, but the broader community, who are the people who provide the data, aren't necessarily engaged, and I think it's really important to be doing this.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. It's really interesting to have a look at what you've been doing. I was just wondering, I know you said it was kind of designed to engage users, but I was wondering whether you had any feedback or you've seen any impact in it driving interest to your census data itself. So I think when we released our quiz, we saw not only that the quiz itself was popular, but we saw a peak in the number of people who were then going to the data itself and accessing their local area data, and that's kind of the real nitty-gritty of the data. So I was just wondering whether you'd seen that same drive.
We haven't done any relationship between metrics on our purely data dissemination products and trying to match that to use of the game. But I think that's a bit of a tricky thing to sort of integrate as well, because they're so different, and the metrics that we can get from the App Store on how many downloads there are, it's a little bit suspect for statistical kind of people. But I think that as obviously the participation in the 2016 census is what we're looking to drive as well, and willing participation, quality data coming through that. We already have a very good response rate in the census, but we know that we haven't got a good response rate from young adults. And so if we can see an improvement in that from the data that comes through in the 2016 census, then I think that we can attribute some of that to this game.
It's that response rate that you're looking to drive, really, rather than kind of the access of the data. I suppose your outcome would be your response rate has increased and your engagement is a bit higher, rather than you have more views on your local area data.
I think it's hard. I think that really what we're trying to do is engage everyone in using the data and understanding the data. But I think that that's a difficult thing to measure against this game. So I think that the measure then of whether it's been successful might only be directly able to make that connection with the 2016 response rates. But it's an interesting thought to try to see if more people are accessing our data. It's difficult to attribute it to any one thing. That's the tough thing.
I did like your presentation and your exercise, your effort, because a census is a typical top-down exercise that each NSCI has to face each 10 years. And so experiences like yours, in order to motivate citizens to respond to the questionnaire, sometimes is very often is considered the response burden, can be really useful, even if the usage of data in a constructive way to drive policies and so on, something different. But I like the effort to motivate citizens because motivating them, it's easier to have good answers to the questionnaires and to increase the quality of data.
I wonder if a crucial aspect of the game is related to the up-to-date of the figure among census. Because figures of the census are updated every 5 or every 10 years. So I think that this game that you showed should, in order to maintain interest about the game, you should also think how to update the data during the among the census. So I don't know if you have think about this problem, or
maybe could we deal with this maybe at lunchtime? Is that possible? I'm just aware that we're running out of time for the next presentation. Thank you for the question though, Stefano. Unless Emily, you had a very quick response to that. Yeah. Go.
So the game is updated as people make responses, as they make decisions throughout the game. And that I'm not quite sure how what the algorithms are behind. Based on their decisions, the data changes, and that's to emphasise that periodic nature of the census. But we may update the game with 2016 data when it comes, and maybe there can be comparisons with 2011 then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we go to our last presentations now. So they don't feel rushed, we might start the lunch break a little bit late, but we have Lorena Sanchez, who will present the Better Life Index, and Paolo Veneri from the Governance Directorate, who's going to present the Regional Wellbeing Index, which are two OECD examples that have been very successful at bringing our data to a wider audience. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be succinct, because I'm hungry too. I'm very jealous, Emily, of your game. Already thinking of how and if we ever could steal some of your ideas. As Kate said at the beginning of the session, the OECD has been working on going beyond GDP and well-being for over 10 years now. And in 2011, we launched the Better Life Initiative, which includes the index, but also a lot of work, including the House Life Report, and most recently, How's Life in Your Region, which Paolo will tell you more about. The index, it fits in this session because it is a web platform for communication, but it also dips into the afternoon session because it's also a provider of content, a way to crowdsource what the public is feeling about well-being. And I think that as I present the index to you today, you'll see that many of our challenges actually come from that tension of, well, are we a communication tool? Are we crowdsourcing? And if the information that we're crowdsourcing, is it really in the best shape to then be fit into the policy process? When you come to the Better Life Index homepage, this is what you see. The countries, or the flowers that are pictured here in the center, represent the 34 OECD member countries, as well as Brazil and the Russian Federation. And each petal on the flower corresponds to one of 11 different dimensions that are part of the OECD's well-being framework. Those 11 dimensions can be seen here on the right in a control panel. And what the user, the visitor, the citizen is invited to do when they come to the website is to give each of the 11 a ranking. So if I give here, for example, a 5 to jobs, the flowers have started to move, the petals have grown or shrunk. And if I show you a view by rank, you can see how the countries shape up based on the preference that I've given to jobs. Now, this is one of, I think, our first challenges, is that what exactly can you understand from this index? When we launched the project, we said that we wanted this to be something that was for citizens, by citizens. So this reflects their preferences and not an OECD report card of how the countries stack up in this particular dimension or as a whole. So that's something that we're working on. What we wanted people to do is that they come, they create their index, as I'm quickly doing now. See, work-life balance 5. And that when you finish your index, you get a sense of what countries are getting it right, or which countries are performing well in the areas that are important to you. So I can see, based on the preferences that I've noted, that Norway, Denmark, and Australia, things we knew already probably, are at the top of the list. What you're also able to do, and what we hope people do, is that they look, for example, if I gave a top to education, that they would be curious about why is it that some countries perform better in these areas than others, and that they would go, so here I have Finland at the top, that they might go and do some exploring on why Finland does so well. And what you find in each of the country pages is kind of an overview of life in that country, as well as reports that give you more detail on what's going on. So actually, in addition to being a portal for all of the work on OECD in well-being, it's also a way for you to get access to a wealth of OECD reports in a lot of different areas that fit into what you may be looking up when you go in here. You can see here, how's life in Finland, society at a glance, government at a glance, and so on. You can also go into the topic pages and find out more information on a particular topic, dimension, and which indicators are being used to support the index from that initial screen. When you create your index, you're also able to share it with whoever you like over social media, email it to yourself, or we hope share it with the OECD. And so here you have a button here, share your index. And when you share your index, you're asked, when you go to share your index, you're asked for 3 different questions: where you're from, say, United States, you're also asked to, this is kind of the comment area of the website, what a better life means to me. And I'm going to just put a test there so we know it was me. And there you have the different options that you have for sharing the site, for sharing your index. What is new this year is that for the first time, we've communicated back what people are sharing with the OECD. So as of May of this year, actually as of at the end of September, we've received over 81,000 indexes from people visiting the site. This gives you an idea of where those indexes are coming from. The circle size corresponds to the number of indexes or how many indexes we've received from that country. And the color has to do with the dominant well-being topic in that country. So we can see here that for the US, we've gotten over 14,000 indexes, and this represents the largest group. It's also the country where we have the most number of visits. Just this month, the United States has surpassed over 1 million visits since the index has been launched. And here you can see from these indexes what topic is at the top. So we can see here that it's life satisfaction, followed by health, education, work-life balance, environment, safety, jobs, housing, income, community, civic engagement. Now, this leads me to another challenge that we have, is that I think for most of these topics are pretty self-explanatory. Since we started the project, civic engagement has been at the very bottom, which, given the discussion that we're having here today, is pretty ironic. And in fact, when we launched the project, this topic was called governance. And after we had some discussion about whether or not we felt people understood what we meant by governance, we switched to civic engagement. And we're not sure that civic engagement has necessarily improved how much people are giving weight. It seems to have stabilized. It receives, if we have $100, it receives about 6% of that money. What you can also see from this view is a little bit more about who is sharing the index in that country. So we can see here that in the States, it's 54% of the respondents are male to 46 female, and from what ages. You're also able to compare. So if I, let's say, with Australia, it will tell me at the top how many respondents I have from Australia. In this case, nearly 4,000. And it's a little bit hard to see up here, but it'll tell you that health is actually number 1 in Australia compared to the US. So the top 2 are switched. Education is in position number 3, and so on. You're also able to compare with the average across all countries. And here you can see, there's me, and the recent responses. So this new part of the website is actually, it's being updated in real time. And last time I checked, we were at 81,434. Some other things that we've done in the last few years is we've added additional languages. The first language we expanded into was French. And we did see, after the United States, France is the number 1 country in terms of traffic to the website. So that corresponded pretty well. The third language that we went into was Russian. And that has been a bit mixed, because I think for a lot of the time, the people that are using the site may still be using, in some of these countries, may still be working in English. And in terms of making it successful, we really need to put in more effort into reaching out to networks across the different age groups, but also that are working with groups that will be using the particular language platform. Spanish has been the exception. In Mexico, for example, I think traffic increased by over 200%. And it's something, if I look just at traffic since we've launched the Spanish language site, the United States is still number 1, followed by Mexico. And so that we've really seen how that's improved. Mexico and Spain and Chile have been the countries where we've seen the greater increases, where we do more outreach because they are OECD countries. But it's the same case for other Spanish-speaking countries. We launched German this year and Portuguese this year. And German seems to be following the case of Spanish, not as robust as the numbers for that site, but still growing. And Portuguese, after the initial launch, it seems to have been kind of gone back to fairly humble type of traffic. I should say that everything that's powered in the responses site is coming from the index. The amount of traffic information that I've shared from you, we're using Google Analytics. One of the things that's been interesting for us, in addition from understanding where people are coming from down to city level. We can also see which language versions are being used more, and also what pages are being most visited. So even though we like to think that this site or the homepage with the index are the most interesting pages on the website to users, what we found is actually the country pages themselves are what is being clicked through more. And in particular, what is interesting from Google Analytics for us is that when a user is referred from an article, and the article links not the homepage, but let's say an article about Australian well-being links to the Australia page, users will spend as long as 8 minutes on the website combing through the pages. And so that's also given us an idea of how to promote the site overall and who to target, and to continue, even though it's not a new platform, to continue targeting the media as our key interlocutors. What else can I tell you? And then one last thing. So I've talked about some of our challenges along the way, and one of the greater ones too is that we have a lot of complicated information, and right now we're in the process of trying to integrate inequalities into the website. A couple years ago, we introduced gender differences in well-being, and I think for me anyway, this is one of the more confusing or areas of the website where you're getting a lot of information and you're not sure how to untangle it. Again, this is fed by the preferences that users have, but not all indicators included in the index can be broken down by gender. And also, it seems to contradict what people assume that they're going to see when they go into the site. So I think for most users, they're assuming that women are not performing as well as men, but that's only the case if you look at, say, income or jobs. When you look at some of the other dimensions, women are actually doing better. Women are the red dots. So we still have the challenge of trying to make the information that we have on the website more user-friendly, more accessible, and meaningful in that way. So keeping it simple. And in line with that is that the information that you're seeing here on the flowers is a composite index that the OECD has constructed, but it's not meant to be an index where we can say the US is at the top, Australia is at the top, and this seems to be, even though we communicate on a fairly regular basis on how this is meant to be for users, the number one article in the press is still Australia's at the top. Australia's at the top again. Sweden moves one position. And we are asking ourselves this question is whether do we move in that direction? Do we change the website in a radical way that this is not the message that is coming across? And actually, what do we actually want out of this index? I mentioned that tension. Are we communication? Are we a crowdsourcing tool? Because that's, I think, the final challenge I'll underline today, is that while we are very excited by the 80,000 plus shared indexes we've received, they come from a very special group of people. They're not representative. And even though we can talk in many different venues at the OECD about our work on well-being, whenever we talk about this part of it, we can't say with the same authority or in a way that will impact policy in the meaningful way that we want. So I think I'll wait for after Paolo for questions.
Thanks. Good morning. Thanks, Lorena.
Actually, hold on.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try to see if it works. Should work.
There we go.
Okay. Just a few. This web tool, that is a part of the OECD Better Life initiative. It's another output from this initiative, carried out mainly by Gov, and it focuses on region. So we came out 3 weeks ago with this report, How's Life in Your Region, and with this web tool, that is a web tool for visualizing well-being data in 362 OECD regions. So what is a region? A region, of course, is a subnational unit that corresponds in most of the OECD countries to the first administrative tier after the national government. So, for example, in the US and in Mexico are states, in Italy, France are regions, they are called regions, and so on. So the purpose of this project was to have a measure of several well-being dimensions for all these regions that are comparable for all the regions. And if we compare to the Better Life, not index, but the measurement of well-being in the Better Life at national level that Lorena just presented, we try to follow the same approach. So we have we have 9 dimensions instead of 11, and because we don't have some dimensions like the subjective assessment of life satisfaction. We don't have the social connections. Because, of course, at regional level, it's a challenge to find the same indicators at regional level that is comparable all across the entire world. So, another important difference is that in this, with this tool, with this project, we don't measure, we don't provide an overall composite index of well-being. We keep each dimension separate. Okay, so we have an assessment of the various dimensions separate. So when you open the website, the web tool, the first thing you see is that if you allow the browser to do that, it localizes your position. It says you are in Ile-de-France. And so you can just click, because you can just click in Ile-de-France and visualize the profile of the region. It tells you, it reminds a little bit the graphics of the Better Life with a sort of flower, where you have in with each branch represents well-being dimensions, and you have a score in each dimension. It's very easy to interpret, a score going from 0 to 10. And of course, the score is built on the basis of the minimum and the maximum values all across the OECD regions, so it's an international comparison. You also have, at the bottom here, the profile of the name and the profiles of regions that are similar in terms of well-being. It means that they have more or less similar profile in terms of the values of the score for each dimension. And you can click in each of the dimensions. For example, if you click on health, you will visualize this window that gives you the exact number of the underlying indicators, so not just the scores, but the indicators that we really use. In this case, for example, life expectancy in the region or mortality rate. And you also have the position with respect to the country and with respect to the whole OECD. You can also compare. You can also click here and you visualize how France is doing with respect to regional disparities, especially. So you can visualize what are the extent of regional disparities in the country that you have selected. Of course, you can choose the region you want by simply click on the circles, where each circle represents a region. So for example, in this way, you can visualize Tuscany, and you can very easily move the map and go into, for example, to the Americas, United States, and Mexico. So just to summarize, what the basic information this site provides are the scores for each dimensions. So you have an assessment of 9 different dimensions. You have an information about the dynamics of so how it changes. So for example, again, if you click on this dimension, health, you have an information about the dynamics with this arrow that can be upwards or downwards. It means it improved or not. With respect, most of the data are 2013, are relative to 2013, and with respect, we are measuring the change with respect to 2000. So this is the information we provided, basically, and if you go to the home page of the website, you will have several links, and people and users in general can also have very easy access to the data that are underlying this simple kind of graphic tool. So basically, when we received many communications through email, but you can also share what you see through Facebook and through Twitter. There was a lively discussion through Twitter in the last weeks after the launch. And basically what we receive by email is also very often the question on what are the exact indicators, what are the exact years and the sources, and how can I see the data. And so actually people can is also interested on the data, and you can really easily download an Excel file from here. Just clicking here, you will have all this information. I think this is what I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much to both of you. Donatella, I think you had a quick question.
I know your initiative very well, so thank you for this presentation and the implementation you are doing for these initiatives. But I am very interested about the great number of respondents. One was I, of course. Are you studying the characteristic of these respondents? Are you building up metrics, statistics, in order to understand which type of people are the respondents and how can be used as to be a community, I don't know how to say, and how this study can give us some elements about the representativeness of the index constructed by crowd constructed.
At the moment, we're looking at what we can do on the website to have a more representative sample. At the moment, when you do the 3 questions, you're also able to do an extended survey, which asks you things about your household, about your education level, a couple, single, and so on. And to give you an idea, I mentioned 81,000. This extended survey, it's just under 7,000. And if I went back and looked, I would say that the majority of those are probably also the US. And so maybe initially we might be able to do something with respondents from a certain country if we have enough from there. But at the moment, it looks like we may have to either do a survey, a separate survey, or maybe create a separate part of the website to conduct this, and to do it maybe with communities instead of looking at the national picture. Something that we've done just recently is we've launched a community feature. 2 weeks ago at the Women's Forum, they sent out a mailing to their participants, and we gave them a special link. So when they created their index, we were able to kind of look at those together. And it was interesting because it wasn't not maybe surprising given the nature of the discussion at the Women's Forum, but jobs as a dimension was in the top 3. Whereas when you look at just general responses from everywhere, it doesn't figure prominently in the top 5 or 6 or 7 dimensions. So perhaps if we do something more targeted like that with a group that is interested, it could be something that gives you results quickly and that can lead discussions. But informing policy, I think we are a ways from that.
Thank you. Are there any other urgent questions? No. Lorena, are you able to join us this afternoon for the crowdsourcing? Okay, so if there's any questions related to crowdsourcing, we can maybe address that this afternoon as well. Thank you to both of you for your presentations. They're really interesting. And thank you to all of you. It's been a long morning, so I really appreciate your attention. And it's not the most atmospheric room, so thank you for your questions and your participation. A couple of notes. Just quickly before lunch. First of all, you may have at your desk a note about participating in a 1-minute film. You may find yourself tracked down by Salima in the corner there, either at lunchtime or at the coffee break this afternoon if you feel like helping us out, giving us a video on your views on well-being. And for lunch, for external non-OECD participants, we have vouchers for you if you plan to stay for lunch and to join us for the afternoon session. So Susie will give you your voucher for the canteen, which can be found if you leave the room on your left. There's a staircase just next to the coffee bar. You take that up and you'll be right by the entrance to the canteen. So thank you again to everybody, and we'll see you back here at 13:35. Okay, thank you. Bye.
We can leave our things here.